Our meeting to order, and it is April 15th, 2019, meeting of the Addison Central School District Board. And we would be so inclined. How about a round of introductions? Suzanne, if we could begin with you.
Suzanne Buck.
Davina Damory.
Jory Jacobite. Betty Kafumbe.
Jan Newceder. Lorraine Morse.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Peter Conlon.
Chip Malcolm.
Victoria Jetty. Peg Martin.
And Vicki Wells, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services.
And we have a couple of administrators here with us as well.
Brittany Gilman, Business Manager.
Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Yeah. And this is the time when we have public comment. I don't know if you're here to comment or to witness, but if you're here to speak, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. My name's Samantha. I live in Ripon, Vermont.
We have your full name.
Samantha Eisenberger.
Oh, thank you.
And I guess I am here to request additional opportunities for the community to participate in this decision-making before July, when it sounds like it's going to happen. And according to what we learned at the last master facilities meeting, there is no other opportunity for that to happen. So I think that's quite important, as the last meetings happened in the fall, and this information was just revealed last week, and a lot of big decisions need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
My name is Laura McIntosh. I'm from Ripon, and I'm just going to read what I wrote. And we didn't chat beforehand, but it's pretty much the same thing. But I wanted to first start by thanking you all, because I know that you spent a lot. I know that we've been involved for just a small fraction of it, and you've done a lot of behind the scenes work, and I recognize that and appreciate that. And I want to start by thanking you for all of the work that you've done. But I also want to urge you all to slow down this process, because to us it feels really fast. And I think that we need to ensure that everyone can be heard, and I don't think the process in its current timeline and its current format is allowing for that. I've really appreciated that we've met as a full consolidated district during these community meetings and the one to come, because I've actually learned a lot about other perspectives. But I think that's been a good part of the process, but I think it's only a part of the process. Even though we're a consolidated district, we're still made up of individual communities that have diverse wants and needs and hopes and dreams. And I hope there can be a next part of this process where you all, with hopefully the steering committee, can actually meet with each of the individual communities to hear us. Because it's really hard to feel represented by you if we don't have a chance to have a discussion with you. So we need the opportunity for back and forth discussion, and I'd love for the opportunity to have that. We're on the second to last step of a timeline that you projected, with the end being in July, or soon in summer, say, and that just feels really fast and too fast for us to make these important decisions. So please consider slowing down this process in order to enable us to feel heard.
Thank you, and we'll include those comments with everything else that we've heard. And we probably, as we go along, we'll think more about the process and where it goes. I think that the concept that in July 1, which it probably is an optimistic date at this point, that there's going to be this fully baked, here's exactly what's happening plan, is not likely. Now, it'll be a board discussion, but we don't even have a direction yet. And so that plan that comes out in the summer could be as vague as we need to investigate further. So we may need to do a better job communicating that about sort of the next steps and the final result and all of that, and we will try to do that to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page as to where we are. And yeah.
May I ask a question? What to you would be a satisfactory coming together? Is it the board going to individual communities specifically and listening. I think the board has tried to do listening, but it's very hard, it's hard to
I
listen.
think that's exactly what we're asking for, and the board and the steering committee, because isn't the steering committee part of the, I don't know, if the steering committee is part of the decision-making process, then the board and the steering committee, I'm not sure how that.
No, it's a board decision-making
Okay,
process.
so the board, yes, to come, we've got questions that can't necessarily get answered in this community meeting format. We've got comments, we've got ideas, we've got sentiment to deliver, we've got a lot to tell you and ask you and learn from you. And so, and I think that if you came and listened to us and answered us, we would feel more heard. And I think, I can't imagine that other communities don't feel the same way, although I can't speak for that. So yes, I think if you came to each community, that would help.
Sorry, Vic, I thought your question was for the board. We generally don't get
Oh,
involved in
sorry.
a back and forth dialogue. Yeah.
That's why I asked, I should have been more specific, excuse me.
Well, thank you both. Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. Okay, on to the approval of the minutes for April 1st, 2019. Somebody move the minutes, please, first?
I'll move them. Second.
All right, they've been moved and seconded. Any changes, corrections? Anybody can see? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining?
Me.
All right, we can be sure that the secretary records that. Okay. Bills, Chip, are you reporting on bills?
I am. There were two sets of bills. First one on the 8th of April, read by Victoria and Betty. There was a total of $60,223.20, $40 auto withdrawal, and payroll expenses of $66,452.36 for a total of $126,715.56. Today, the bills were read by myself and Victoria. There was a total number of director's order district funds of $281,189.14 and payroll expenses of $798,400.48 for a total of $1,079,589.62. I move that we pay the bills as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Is it just the way the payroll works, that one time you do it, it's huge, and one time you do it, it's small?
We're reading the bills on a weekly basis, so, and it varies a lot. The payroll can be nothing to a big number,
Yeah.
and that's because of that. The other ones vary a little bit, just interesting, because we had questions today on certain things. There's certain interest due at certain times, there's certain principal due at certain times that end up in the regular bills. And there's also there were a lot of bills where money was going out to the daycare providers or preschool providers across everywhere at this point, from this district going out to outlying other places. So that number was inflated, so to speak, by those, what you would say is periodic expenses. A couple times a year, I think it is, on some of that, so. Quarterly, yeah. So it varies a lot. The payroll expenses obviously probably don't that much because they're on a 2-week basis, so. From one time to another they will, but the actual. No.
So why is there, then why would there be payroll on a sort of an off week? Probably more.
Sometimes we have payroll taxes or
Okay.
other things that would fall under payroll might be like HSA or HRA expenses, things like that.
Okay.
We only review that number. We
Yeah.
don't go through the list of payroll.
Just curious,
Yeah.
yeah.
We
If
do
we have
go through
taxes
every
or
bill, and
things that we
depending on
pay.
how specific it is, or if we have questions about it. Now, most of them are repetitive. You see the same things all the time. A lot of it's travel expenses, reimbursement. not necessarily the big number, but there's a lot of those kinds of bills.
Lot of budget for
Food
them.
service, supplies for schools, seasonal supplies, and all the buildings and grounds types of things which come through. So they're all signed off. For those who don't realize how it's done, the bill comes through and it's signed off by whoever the manager of that particular is, whether it's Kathy Deeman or Bruce McIntyre or whoever it is, basically says, yeah, this is legitimate, and then it's sent forth and compiled in whatever way Melissa does in the office. I find it very organized. It's a little busy work, it's true, but it does give us impact or input into the questioning of some of those expenses, and it does open your eyes to what it costs to run a school, not just the payroll type of things. So,
Well, as a set of checks and balances, it's great to have another set of eyes. Okay, so the bills have been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving them as read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much, all of you, for continuing to continue that process. Chip, are you continuing to find the second set of eyes available when needed?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Betty's sitting with us, and Mary's been involved, and I think so far we're in pretty good shape. I mean, if anyone wants to do it, it's fine. It's just a matter of, Victoria and I seem to have that as a Monday morning at 8 o'clock or 8:15. You just sort of do it, and if she's bringing child to school maybe, or it's just easy for me to be there and do it at a regular time, it takes us 30 to 60 minutes, I
Yep.
guess. It's not really onerous.
Much appreciated. Okay, next item on our agenda is to talk a little bit about the facilities master plan development and maybe some of the takeaways and go forwards from the first two, and we got our third and final repeat on Wednesday. And so who's kicking off here?
I'm not exactly sure what we're focusing on here. I have committee update portion.
Well, yeah, let's-
I don't know if part of that
Yeah,
is
that
just-
seems,
Okay, so we talked about, for one portion that would involve the whole board is numbers. So anticipating perhaps a higher audience or attendance from the community this coming Wednesday, we may need to have more small table conversations. And we'll double check with the steering committee to make sure of their numbers to facilitate. We also just wanted to check in with board members to see how many board members were coming and engage comfort level with potential facilitating by board members if there are enough tables that we need to act in that role as opposed to the observing board member role.
so do you show of hands how many plan to make it Wednesday?
Sure,
All right,
that looks pretty good, doesn't it?
all right. I don't know about Mary and who else are we missing tonight?
Amy.
Amy. Yeah. All right, and how many of you all feel comfortable facilitating in case we don't have enough steering committee members to handle all the tables?
Sure.
Great. That looks good.
Great.
doesn't it?
So yeah, so I think the plan for this Wednesday was just to, kind of stick with what we had. Because basically if there was too many people to be able to facilitate all of the tables, then we might need to, think about a new direction. But from the feedback from our committee and from others that I've spoken with, the process of the small group discussions seems to be really effective. And so we wanted to try to continue that as much as possible. So that's that portion. And then once we have that information, we will have all of the sticky notes to compile, and the word on the street is that Sherika will start working on that process, so that we'll have that data to be able to review and discuss hopefully at our next meeting. And the Grand Challenges email is open for more in-depth comments and questions. And that is open through the end of the month,
Yep.
I believe. And so then once that is in, and kind of a fun update, I'm not sure if I told all of you about this, the high school is actually conducting a survey Wednesday, and it's not the same type of data. They're not sort of getting the data that we're all getting at the forums at the adult level. It's more about their experience and how it felt and what school did they come from, if it was one of the ACSD elementary schools, and just kind of get some perspective of it as a student who has been through the various schools, and talk about some of the equity questions, especially from the student's perspective, and getting into some of the facilities concerns, like how effective were the facilities in these various categories from your experience. So that'll be exciting.
Will we get that? Will that come back to us?
Yeah. Well, so initially it comes, so Chris Altimos is on the steering committee. He is a high school teacher, and so he worked with the 2 students who are on the steering committee to put that survey together with some input from some of the additional steering committee members. And so it's going through his Gmail account, so it's a Google survey. So I'm not exactly sure how he gets it in. I've actually never done a Google survey myself. And I imagine he will then share it with the steering committee, and then we'll be able to then share that data out to the board. So I'm super excited about that because we haven't really had that student voice, and I've felt sad that it's been missing through this whole process, and so I'm excited about that.
Great. Thank you. Yes, Chip?
A comment relative to the format. When we as a board decided to do this with these 3 times, we did it in response to what we felt was a good exercise when we did it at our retreats, relative to thinking at a very high level. Not to the point that this was a hearing on 4 different proposals, okay? This was to me, and it varied a lot depending, I think, from my 2 nights sitting there as to how it sort of functioned. So I just want to make that comment that per your discussions before and the visitors that came to comment, these weren't hearings. These were trying to think at other levels so that we could come to some conclusion. And it's also important, I think, to say, as we've said every time, and you have, that the status quo is not okay. We need to find other ways to be able to organize this district, facilities-wise, obviously, but also the equity component of educational opportunities. So I just think we have to keep our eye on that big picture. And I don't know when we're going to get to a point of when we actually, as a board, have to decide. We have to decide that. And then, of course, there'll be many public comments and other things down the road. And there's ways to, there's ways for the public to actually totally be involved with that, because they're going to vote for bonds or not vote for bonds or other types of things. So, I mean, it's not like but we have to have something to be able to decide on, and we as decision makers are the ultimate ones, however heavy that may be for us.
Right.
We'd love to have a way that all this information says, oh, that is the absolute right direction to go. I don't think that's going to be the case, but it would sure be nice if there was sort of
a consensus is a wonderful thing when you can have it.
When you can have it, yeah.
Any further questions for Jen? So we'll move on to, since that opened up with kind of a committee update there. I'll follow along with the negotiations committee. I can't remember when we met last time. We have reached the point of agreement with the teachers. The sort of how the sort of money gets spread about is being finalized. I think the teachers have actually already ratified the contract. So that's a settled deal. The negotiations with the support staff is a little more complicated as we continue that merging of, a system at the high school and middle school that was fully unionized with a kind of a union system set up with all of the other wage earners within the district, and how you blend all those together. Brittany's been working very hard on spreadsheets and wage scales and whatnot. It's something that's very important to the people we're negotiating with, and because they want a system that sort of evens up everybody within the district. It's a complicated process because when we were so many different districts, everybody sort of had different ways of doing it. And so much like when we brought all the teachers to the same wage scale, it took 3 years. We're sort of trying to figure out how best to make it happen with the support staff. So anyway, because it's complicated, those talks are ongoing. And for no other reason than it's complicated. It's not antagonistic or acrimonious. Yes?
Is this a one-year contract, or is it?
By law, it has to be a one-year
1 year.
contract. All contracts must sunset at the end of FY '20.
Is that the case going forward too?
No. The reason why is because for healthcare, that is from now on going to be negotiated, an agreement will be negotiated at the state level. And so you can't really negotiate the rest of the contract without knowing that.
Right.
And so to negotiate a new contract, the sort of the timeline, the very optimistic timeline, is that the state level negotiations will wrap up in mid to late fall, hopefully giving districts enough time to then work on their, what will hopefully be a multi-year contract coming out of that. But in the meantime, everything's got to sort of come to a conclusion at the end of FY '20, so that the new terms can take place and be negotiated. Yeah, yes.
My understanding is that the discussion has been difficult, let's put it at the state level.
Well, there was an article in Digger that sort of implied that.
Yeah.
And then I happened to run into the executive director of the NEA in the hallway, and I said, "Oh, gee, I read this." He said, "No, things are going okay. They're really, they're months out, so they're just trying to get things." He said that things are moving along.
I guess my question was, that would follow along with that is there a plan B if for some reason that negotiation is not able to come to some conclusion in the
Yeah,
fall?
so much like the sort of steps we have to go through to get a full contract, they have to go through similar steps. And if they can't reach agreement, ultimately it goes to binding arbitration, I think.
Yep.
It does, yeah.
By
Yeah.
August 1st, they have to have an agreement by August 1st, or else it goes to binding arbitration.
And that's not August 1st of this year, that's
Yeah.
this August 1st?
Yes.
They go to binding arbitration?
Yep.
Oh.
Because then they have to have arbitration, and we need to have a decision like around December in order
Yeah.
to budget for
All
FY
right.
You didn't sign up for this
That was my
committee?
wonderful.
Yeah. And actually, so one side is, rank and file NEA members, on the other side is rank and file school board members. Each side sort of advised by the expertise behind them. But it's just sort of a microcosm of the typical negotiations that's going on.
Too bad we couldn't come up with something new.
Yeah. It's going to be challenging. This is one where you sort of say, be careful what you wish for, for example, the governor, who this was one of his wishes. We'll see what happens. Anything to report from
Yes.
policy?
We discussed the draft wellness policy, which was created by the community partnership. Erica and
Eric?
Eric Jensen. They have presented a very nice draft for us, and we would like to warn it, or at least put it on
The agenda.
next committee, or next board meetings notes, so that everybody has a chance to look at it, and then discuss it, have some time to discuss it at our next meeting, and then vote on it later in May, if that's okay. I don't know if
That
that's the
sounds like
process.
that sounds like the schedule.
Okay. And this policy incorporates what is currently the required wellness policy, which includes the nutrition services and physical education. This policy is more enhanced, that it includes a broader whole child look. So it includes 8 components: health education, physical education, health services, psychological and guidance services, employee wellness, physical environment, and culture, social emotional culture of the school. So it's much broader than just nutrition and physical ed. So it's extensive.
Well, as you go forward, Eric was also the one who headed up, when he was on the UD3 board, headed up the students on boards policy discussion.
Right. And that was our second policy discussion we had tonight,
Oh,
was
you
on
did?
the
Good.
student on the school board, and Eric was very helpful.
Oh, good.
giving us some of his experience. And what we as a committee have decided to do is to meet with the students who are on the community partnership group. And I actually had a student call me today requesting an opportunity to talk. And so we're going to try to set up a meeting before our next board meeting to just meet with the students and their advisor, Carrie Ann Severy, and talk about how to incorporate them into a school board, having them on the membership so that they're feeling like their voices are heard and that they are valued by us,
Yeah.
and that they're not just a token stamp. So we hope to have more information on that at our next meeting.
Great.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Finance did not meet.
Finance did not
All
meet.
right. Any-
Money's no problem.
Excellent.
Lots of money, grows on trees. Manna from heaven.
We can write checks easily, right?
Anything else from you? Rather quiet.
Yeah, I don't have a report
All
this meeting, so yeah, I think things are moving
I'm
along.
thinking about the facilities master plan development, and we
Yeah.
kind of jumped into the dialogue, 'cause that's a contributing part to it. We had talked about, kind of getting some of the information, some of the, kind of background information going on that. And so I could ask you if you have anything to share on that. And also in our meeting, we did talk about some, kind of alluding to what Peter was talking about regarding what is that really going to look like. And I know we've had that conversation for almost a year and a half now of like, what will it actually look like? How detailed? Is it going to be more broad? And some of what we talked to, and to maybe put Caitlin on the spot, she really eloquently spoke to some of the sort of, this is what the ideal classroom and school would look like, and to get there we would backfill into, and then that's how we would get there. And so I think to clarify sort of what are some of our goals as far as, what the staffing would look like in a school, and what the classroom size would look like in a school, and some of, maybe if you want to, I don't know if she's even allowed to speak at this point, I think she is, speak a little bit more about what she
It's up to the
said.
discretion of the chair.
And so I'm just thinking that as we're talking about the master plan development, to
Yeah.
keep some of those types of ideas in mind, because those are some of the things that we could be working on now as well, just to kind of get those on paper to see how that feels.
I'm guessing you're going to say that Jen just explained it pretty well.
Not really well.
Well, just that we were talking about some of the questions that came up in the various sessions, pointing to places where we appreciate we need to collect more data to go to the next round of analysis and thinking, but that data ultimately we need to make sure that we're connecting it to a greater vision. One of the things that came up in comments was, what's the number we need to get to? Right? And it's not as much a bottom line number that we need to get to as a vision of an educational system that we're trying to create for our kids. And so the conversation we were having was about the next round of this process, really starting to anchor some of those data in some more details around that vision. It wasn't a plan or a plotting out, it was really much more a conversation about what feels like it might be coming down the line in terms of the analysis.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I would say, in terms of data and the level of where we are right now, I think the board started out in the fall really asking the community, you all came forward with status quo is not an option, and we want to start looking at and brainstorming, where do we go from here? We know we have these facilities needs that are pretty significant. We can't meet these needs year by year. So we have to have a long-range plan to invest in our infrastructure and not try to Band-Aid year by year and hope that we get by. We have to have some kind of coherent vision that connects both our instructional vision with our financial reality, with our declining enrollment, et cetera. So I think in terms of where we were very high altitude in the fall. That has come down a little bit to this last round, and I think the board's work from here is going to be looking at, as you then come down further, in altitude and start to think about what, based on what the board has heard from the community, based on what the board knows about the data from the school system, there may be further data needs that are required to further that analysis, but it's going to really depend on where the board wants to go in terms of the data that we need. So I think in terms of a process and where we're going to get to, I think a lot of that has to do with where the board comes together to look at this 10-year plan in thinking about all the facilities needs and really kind of thinks about and maps that out. Similar to what Caitlin said about backwards mapping, it is looking ahead pretty far and backwards mapping to figure out what's the work to do now to then lead to this place that we want to be based on the information that we have.
Right.
All right.
It's not easy.
Dope.
I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Hasn't been from day one. All right. Well, so Wednesday, again, we're at 6:30 or 7?
6:30.
6:30. I have it right here in front of me.
Yep.
There will be food if people show at 6. For just kind of a pre. It's mostly to get a sense of numbers and making sure everybody's got a name tag on, that sort of prep work.
Yeah, and if we are in the position where we're going to need to facilitate, the role is just a little different than the role of being board member. So we would just want to talk about that as we're seeing people enter and just kind of get a brief kind of explanation from Bob, especially as far as what we think our role should be. I know I got myself in trouble a couple of times by putting too much of a board member hat on and trying to over-explain things, and as a facilitator, it really is just keeping them on point with, the process and putting things into the parking lot and keeping along with the timing as much as possible and keeping the conversation focused on the task at hand. And sometimes as board members, we want to, reassure and, provide more information and background and all of that. And if we're in that other role, we have to, just kind of focus not on that, so.
It's most important that they're well facilitated. And I was finding that it was really mixed, and so I appreciate being asked to facilitate, to help make sure that it stays on track and that it really is the conversation that we're seeking and not getting bogged down in the specifics that we know we're not wanting to get into right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we're not even asked specifically to be facilitators at a table, say there is enough steering committee members, I think we can still feel comfortable doing that part. Maybe as board members and knowing what we're looking for here, we can still assist in that facilitating. Remember, we're all community members. We're all doing our best. None of us are professional facilitators. And the steering committee is really doing a stand-up job in getting out of their comfort zones to do this. This is a task that they were not psyched to take on that role, and kind of being the spotlight because they didn't feel qualified. And from what I've seen, they're doing such a great job, and we're all doing such a great job to the best of our abilities. And so as much as we can help them, I'm sure that they would be happy to take that help.
So Jen, if we're coming, you want us to be here at 6 or early?
Between 6 and 6:15. I think just a little bit early, just so we have a sense of who's there and what our roles might need to be.
Okay.
So we might need to be a little bit more flexible.
Yep.
And I do just want to reiterate what I sent out to all of you. We've been seeing a lot of each other, and that's been great, and it's been also very much appreciated. It's been a big commitment.
Wasn't sure how you were going to finish.
I know you've been all like maybe a little less of each other.
Our families more, at least.
Yes. Anyway, so if there's nothing else, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Say a poem.